Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today's talk is on how to think with conscience. Our ability to think makes us humans. And before we do any research, as a matter of fact, before we do any action, we have to think. If we are not thinking, most likely we are being ghafil, meaning we are not being human. And this is true for daily living, for any study, for any scientific investigation, or even doing any act of ibadah, worship. First, we think, who is a role model? Because we always need a role model. We need to, inherently, we need to have something, somebody we're emulating or following. If you ask somebody who is a Muslim, right away, so of course, Prophet Muhammad is my, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is my role model. Most of the time, they're actually not conscious or they're lying, especially when it comes to scientific investigation. They really do not take Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as a role model. Next question we ask is, what is the most important criterion? So before you go there, ask the question, what is Rahma? You see, in English, if you look at the translation, it's empathy. Empathy right away gives you an idea. It means think about something else that is not connected to you. Like if you're thinking of future, it's empathy. If you're thinking of other people, it's empathy. But that does not capture the whole meaning of Rahma. In Arabic, when you say Rahma, right away you think of mercy, you think of kindness. Why is that? Because real empathy takes kindness. Otherwise, how would you think about that? Even for yourself, if you do not have Rahma, you do not think of yourself. You are being merciless towards yourself. And this is really puts Rahma as the first criterion for doing thinking or doing research. In Arabic, Rahma comes from the root word Ram, which is fetus. Think about a fetus, which means sorry, it's not fetus, it's Fetus totally depends on the womb. Womb doesn't benefit anything from the fetus, even though in reality it does, but when it comes to Allah, Allah calls himself Rahman and Rahim. So he's like the infinite womb encircling whole creation and nourishing the creation with kindness. It's one way. Creation can do nothing to him, does not benefit him, but he's doing everything for the creation. So it's a very meaningful word. So it's beyond empathy. It's more like everything combined, starting with kindness and love and everything, all the divine qualities. It turns out Rahman and Rahim, those are the first two traits of Allah mentioned in Quran. And sure enough, we also, being created in the image of Allah, we also have those. But that's topic of another episode. For the moment, Rahma is the most important criterion for thinking or for doing research. Who is the epitome of Rahma? It's Allah. Allah calls himself Ar-Rahman, which means literally is the womb that tends in space to infinity. Rahim is the empathy in time, is Rahma in time tending to infinity, for all time, for everything in space and everything in time. So think about that quality. If you can predict what is going to happen in space and what is going to happen in time, that's the true research. That makes you prophet. Prophet literally means the ability to predict. Prophecy is to predict. In Chinese, the word that goes for prophet, it literally means first one to know. In research, you have to be the first one to know. Otherwise, it's not research, you're just copying something. Man with the greatest Rahma. Allah created us with Rahma, and we know that for a fact. Prophet Muhammad is the epitome of Rahma. He is the Rahma for humankind, for us. Allah's Rahma for us. And he had the greatest Rahma. As I said, the ability to have Rahma makes you a saint, makes you a prophet. And sure enough, it makes you saint in English would be, in Arabic would be alim, the greatest alim. So ilm and Rahma are connected. Next most important requirement is the sincerity. Why do I say that? In Quran, 15:39 and 40, Shaitan tells us that he will mislead everybody, but mukhlis, sincere. We also know deen is nasiyah. Nasiyah is rooted in the word sincerity. First, you have to have Rahmah. You have to be connected with Ar-Rahman and Rahim. Second, you have to have sincerity. Why is it important? Because in 4:119, Shaitan told us that he will mislead us. He would invoke desire in us. He would order us to mutilate creation. He will order us to change everything natural to artificial, including thought process. So to avert Shaitan, we have to belong to the group that Shaitan cannot touch. And himself said he cannot affect people with mukhlis, the one who are sincere. So what does sincerity mean? How do I know you're sincere? It's in your intention. Only Allah knows. You don't have to proclaim that I'm very sincere, brother. Your intention is only known to yourself and Allah. And there comes the model. We call it knowledge model. It's the ilm model. It's based on intention. That's Islam. First Hadith talks about intention. But last 300 years, the role of intention from research has been disconnected. And that's why you see hundreds and thousands of papers. They all confirm whatever the sponsor wants, invariably. And you can say from that one that people who take money from the corporations that are evil, their intention is not good. You don't have to prove it. If you take money from the corporation, your conclusion is completely unreliable because it's not based on intention. So true knowledge is in the intention model. And this one is really scientific. We have data, there's lots of them. We have information. After filtering data, we say, these are the facts, others are spurious. They don't have validity. Then from that, we extract knowledge. Then we decide, this is the model that was used by Bukhari first time. You know, he collected firsthand, not from reading a book. He collected 700,000 hadiths with all the narrations going back to Prophet Muhammad. He verified all the living ones. He interviewed them, God knows how many. And he memorized all the chain. Look at the process. That was his information. And he discarded many of them because the chain was not reliable. Have you heard of such a process in any scientific study or any study at all, where everybody is vetted for truthfulness? Then 700,000 of them, with all the narration going back to Prophet Muhammad. After that, you vet some more, you process some more, you discard something does not make sense, or there is a weak link. He confirmed 7,000 of them. What is that? But 1%. So your data is 100, your conclusion, the final deciding one is 1. Validated out of 100 points, 1 point. Can you imagine a physical experiment with that kind of rigorousness? It's impossible. That's why I say the most important research undertaken in human history was the compilation of Quran, but it was a state project, a state-sponsored project. But as an individual, the most important research work undertaken was the compilation of Hadith with Imam Bukhari first time. If you look at the science that we just discussed, this is unprecedented in human history. And we see why it is important to have books of Hadith. So now we are back to having intention. Without intention, we don't have a start. Remember, we have to have sincerity. Then we have to have a major premise. That's Quran. Then we have to have a minor premise, that's Hadith. And this process is called deductive logic, which happens to be also the same thing as aql, consensus logic. So imagine if one of them is faulty, we'll see we don't have a conclusion. If one of them is missing, as many Quranists say that we don't need Hadith, we have absolutely no basis for anything. We cannot conclude. It's like having a circle and you are supposed to make a conclusion with a shape. It could be anything. Just 1 point, you can make a circle, you can make a diamond, you can make any shape. It has no meaning whatsoever. This is what Shaitan wants you to do. In 4:119, Shaitan said, I will cause dalala first. So if you remove any of this, if you have doubt in any of those, then you're dalun right away. You're completely misguided. With Allah's mercy, it turns out Quran is the oldest book. And Book of Hadith is the second oldest book retained in the original version. We talk about this university, and you say, we always look for university degrees. First university was created, mashallah, we're quite proud. It was created by Muslim woman, and it was a Muslim, where indeed they learned Islam first before anything else, and they graduated. You know the fact about this? They were learning Quran and Hadith and the fiqh of Imam Malik. And we'll have another discussion, having another point, as what Imam Malik says, makes it spurious. It makes it illegitimate, the process. But that's another point. The point I'm trying to make here, a university will not make you an alim. It's your individual endeavor. Or a scientist, for that matter. Without hadith, not a single verse of Quran can be interpreted, not one. If you have any counterexample, bring it up. This is scientific fact. Both deductive and inductive logic, you can look it up, what they mean. They both have major and minor points. We cannot have just one. So without both, there is no thinking process. It turns out the word ikra actually translates into, we call it reading, but that's not correct. It's deduction. Quran itself, which is rooted in the word ikra, means the collection of deductions. How about hadith? Individual hadiths are called questions, and the chapters are called gate, bab. So look at the first chapter. It's called Revelation. 5,000 years ago, there was another evil emperor. Guess what his book was called? Basic Questions. What was the first chapter? Spiritual pivot. Do you see that? Revelation and spiritual pivot? That's Sunnah of Allah. Throughout history, it's known that question and answer is the way to learn, to increase knowledge. So what are the unique features of Quran? This is a fact, without being emotional about it. This is the only book that goes, here God Almighty is speaking to you. That's a fact. You cannot find another book that tells you, unless you make it up tomorrow. This is also the oldest book preserved in original form. I had this debate with a guy, a dean in UK, and he was saying, well, there is preserved tablets from thousands of years ago. I said, who's talking about tablet? You don't even know how to read them. Just a page somewhere lying around. It's a book. It's a complete book. And that language is still spoken. So don't pay attention all to those nonsense. This is a fundamental fact. This is the oldest book preserved in its original form. It's also only book that uses science more than 800 times as the third most used word after Allah and Rabb. No other book uses the word science so frequently. And now idiots tell us that, well, Quran, Islam is about ilm, brother, science is about what Newton said. If you do not understand the ilm is science, you should not be speaking. This is also the only book where we have to start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You see the value of Ram and Rama. When we eat, we say Bismillah. When we do any word, we enter a house, we say Bismillah. Only time we say Bismillah Rahman Rahim is when you start the Quran. So what are the unique features of Hadith? This is the only book, write it down. This is the only book that has chain of narrators going to the original code. You cannot find another scientific document, another book where Newton told another guy told another guy, and all the way to now. It doesn't, referencing does not work that way in any publication. Book of Hadith is the only one. All the quotation, all the references are in chain. So you don't have to trust anybody. You just look at the chain. You can verify them. This is very unique. It's also the second oldest book preserved in original form. And this book happens to be the only place where a man mandated knowledge gathering as compulsory. You see, who makes it compulsory? Allah himself. This is the only time Prophet said it's compulsory. He says first to gather knowledge for each man and woman, no exception. Now, another question is, what is evidence? As in evidence-based science, you've heard that all the time. So, what are you talking about? This is nonsense. This is not evidence-based. Is what new science does. This is dogma. What you are doing is exactly opposite. Islam is the only evidence-based science. Nothing else. And you see that right here. What is the real evidence? Do you know the word evidence? What does it mean? Can it be falsehood? What is absolute truth? It's the Quran. What is second absolute truth? Facts. If it is fact, it's true. Like I fell from the chair, it's a fact. Now, when you're narrating it, it can become non-fact because depending on who's narrating it. So in that regard, the second most important fact or evidence is Hadith. But there is another one which is not often talked about, even though early scholars talk about it as ayah zahiri, meaning visible signs, visible ayah. The events are, as I said, falling from the chair is a fact. But narration has to be accurate. So it's not enough that those facts exist. To have those facts vetted, you have to have the criterion. Again, the criterion goes back to Quran and Hadith. So literally, we are stuck with two evidence, Quran and Hadith. And then use those evidence as a criterion to validate any events, other facts. So evidence is not what you have produced in your supercollider lab. Evidence is not in your enclosed chamber. They're nothing. And that's the real logic. What is not facts? Every new science theory or law within code, because how dare you call it law? Only Allah makes laws. Every theory or law derived from outside of Quran and Hadith. Anything. We tend to say it's new science, it's terrible. After Newton, no. Whatever Galileo did is also incorrect. It's not fact. You cannot use that as evidence. What Prophet said can be used as evidence. What his companion said, what companion said is not an evidence. You know that. So what if they are used as evidence? You know what happens? Remember this syllogism. We'll talk about it in future. All Americans speak French. It's a non-factual. It's not a fact, but you can use that. It's like saying Newton's law is correct. Why not? It's like saying Big Bang theory is correct. It's similar. Macron is an American. Another falsehood. It's a minor premise, but it's also false. But look at the conclusion. Therefore, Macron speaks French. I say, well, wallahi, brother, what are you talking about? Macron does speak French. I say, it doesn't matter. It's a phenomenon. We coin this term. It means it is irrelevant at best. It doesn't matter if it's French or not, because it comes from a deduction which is completely false. You see the point? So it doesn't matter if your plane is flying. It did not mean anything about the equations you drew, you used. It does not validate the equations of the theory that you have used. It means nothing. And that's the point I want to make. Any theory that is not derived from Quran and Hadith is falsehood. They're like using the false premises. What is the methodology we should use? Prophet said, cure to ignorance is to ask questions. And this is unique to Islam. Islam in all epochs. Every prophet used that technique. As I said, even Yellow Emperor had book of questions. And that has been forgotten. Ancient Greek had it. New science, sadly starting from Roman Catholic Church, they started to forget this. They took asking question as an offense. So what type of questions to ask? This is very important. Questions that will please Allah. It's not a random question. Again, niyyah comes into play. Any niyyah other than pleasing Allah is false niyyah. So Prophet could not possibly ask you to ask questions that are false. As a matter of fact, there's hadith, you can check it out. From asking questions that are aphenomenal, he outed the munafiqun. Munafiqs were coming out by the nature of the question they were asking. And this was referred as the first role of intention was referred first hadith. So nothing is by coincidence. What type of questions to avoid? Bani Israel type question. And you can have many of them. One of them is a very cute one that my younger son pointed out when he was a little kid. Does your mother know you're gay? Right? It's kind of obscene, but it assumes that you're gay already. So if you say, oh, no, it doesn't, they say, oh, you're gay, but mother doesn't know. And if you say yes, that means it's confirmed that you're gay. Both ways, you are proving a falsehood. That's typical Bani Israel questions, all of them. You can check it out. And Allah actually said not to ask those questions. It's in Surah Baqarah. Bani Israel's biggest point was they could not ask real questions. They were always asking Bani Israel the questions with underlying false assumptions. So in general, any question that is not motivated by pleasing Allah. So before asking a question, why am I asking this? Will this be pleasing to Allah? Check your niyyah. And you realize that it's very easy to figure it out. Your question is a sign of your own iman. If questions are not motivated by good niyyah, that means you have a problem with the iman, as Bani Israel had. See, a munafiq, when he speaks, he lies. How is that possible? Because his intention is not good. So if a munafiq asks a question, which is intended to please anybody but Allah, please his own ego, trap somebody. His intention is not good. So by the quality of questions, you can determine your understanding, your iman. You can expose your iman. Whom to ask? Of course, first entity we have to ask is, who do you ask question? Allah. That's the whole purpose of making dua. You seek to Allah. Rabbi zidni ilman. What does it mean? Increase my knowledge. Give me knowledge. You ask Allah first. Then you ask Prophet through his books. What did you do? Then you ask your own conscience. You know why? Because you know your history. That's a very big database. Very big database from your own history. And nobody knows that better than you. And B, that's a factual science. They're natural phenomena. By observing, whatever you're observing in nature. What to ask? This is the simplest question. Don't ask anything else. What would Prophet do? This is the only question you need to ask. So you are tasked to make a nuclear bomb. So what did Prophet do in this case? You know, I can tell you right now. He said, go to hell before making a bomb. It starts with that. When you realize that Prophet would not endorse this, so you have to find something else. And that's the whole purpose of doing research. Don't copy and paste. For that, you can hire a pirate from Somalia. They know better than how to make a mess. You can add ChatGPT. You don't need Quran and Hadith, or you don't need your skill. So don't fool yourself by telling us that, oh, well, I'm following Prophet, I'm being a good Muslim, and then you're copying and pasting. Only question you're allowed to ask is, what would Prophet do? I think that completes this, and I'll probably repeat this episode in presence of audience. Assalamu alaikum.